every day.
Thank you, Senator Wright. Senator Canavan.
Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President. I would like to just speak of two issues this evening. The first is just concluded a financial rural debt roundtable this afternoon that the Minister for Agriculture, almost said Senator, Minister Barnaby Joyce hosted, and I just want to say that it was a productive meeting, and I want to thank the Australian Bankers Association, other representatives from the banking industry, the National Farmers Federation, AgForce, New South Wales Farmers Federation, the Gulf Cattlemen's Association, Kimberley Cattlemen's Association. I'm probably missing some there too. But more than 40 people were there this afternoon to discuss this very important issue, and it was a productive discussion. Of course, not everything was solved in 2 hours. It can't be, Madam Acting Deputy President. This has been a problem that has been growing for a decade in rural areas, particularly in North Queensland, the state I'm from, and it's not going to be solved in an evening. But there were some resolutions from the meeting. Number one, we're going to try and get more data, or better, more accurate data on the problem. There has not been a rural debt survey in Queensland since 2011, and that has partly been because the banks have not cooperated for their own reasons. We're going to try and resolve those reasons and ensure that we can get that going again. We're going to restart the National Rural Debt Mediation process, which was in place until last year. That has fallen off the radar. There are different states have different processes that handle the mediation of debt, and some of them are working better than others. It seems right and proper, while we have this debt issue, that we try to harmonise those and come up with what is the best model across the country. I thank the banks for their cooperation in agreeing to be part of that process. And finally, the Minister has said that there are some, and he has publicly said there are some issues with the farm finance packages that were expanded earlier in the year. They were introduced by the former government. They were expanded and changed earlier this year. There remain some issues in getting that money out to the people in most need. It is a difficult issue because the Commonwealth Government, while they provide the funds, it's actually state government agencies that are responsible for lending the money. So those things, I think, are a positive outcome. Obviously, there are more that needs to be done, and the most important thing is that we try and restore confidence and better prices to the beef markets. This issue has arisen, at least largely, because of a profitability issue, which has been driven by low prices, higher costs, and very much a very big contributor to those low prices has been the disgraceful decision a few years ago by the former Labor government to shut down the live cattle trade overnight. It has had a huge ramifications on beef markets all around Australia, and people until recently have been received record low prices for their beef in a market where they had no option but to sell due to the drought. But because of all that, Madam Acting Deputy President, I did miss what seemed to be the best show that has taken place in this place since I got here, and that was the shenanigans around the Palmer motion. I very much regret missing that, although it seemed to me I turned up for the vote at the end, and it was a movie that perhaps you only need to see the end of it really to enjoy it. You probably didn't need to see the introduction, the body of the story. Coming at the end, I think I got the best part. And it was a movie, I think, Madam Acting Deputy President, I'd seen before. I think I had seen this movie before. It was a movie called The Hung Parliament. Only a few years ago we had a hung parliament. We saw just these kinds of shenanigans, only just a few years ago, only a year ago. We had a hung parliament. Tonight we saw the sequel. We saw the sequel because the Labor Party tried to manage this chamber again. They tried to become the managers of the chamber tonight, and we just saw how fundamentally they failed once again at being able to manage something as simple as establishing an inquiry. It was an inquiry. It was an inquiry. You wanted to establish an inquiry, could not even do that. Could not even organise an inquiry tonight. Madam Deputy President, I was astounded, although I shouldn't have been, given the Labor Party's record. You almost feel like whenever the Labor Party is in charge of something or trying to run something, when you walk through those doors, we should have a little music playing. We should have some music playing. It should be the intro to Monty Python. Remember that, Senator Scully? The Monty Python music should come on, you know, that should play, and then a big foot should come down in this chamber, bang, like that, because that's what it feels like. That's what it feels like when they try to run things. We all remember from the last Parliament, we remember the last Parliament where they tried to push through 55 bills in 1 week. Remember that? 55, they didn't try, they did. They put 55 through bills. 55 bills through in 1 week. 55. Some bills had as little as 5 minutes of debate. Some had less, I think. Some had none. Some had none, just a second reading speech. That is what happens. That is what happens, Madam Acting Deputy President, when the Labor Party tries to run things. They do. They just can't run anything. They cannot. They can't run anything. Remember, we had in the last government we had grocery watch, we had fuel watch. None of these things worked. We had the war on inflation. Remember the war on inflation? What happened to the war on inflation? We declared peace, I think, too early. We had building the education revolution. Remember that? Building the education revolution. We had that. That was a complete disaster too. And then tonight we had the Palmer ascendancy. Madam Acting President, we tried to have the Palmer ascendancy. That didn't work too well either. They just can't manage anything, Madam Acting Deputy President. Now, I was, I must say I was still surprised that they couldn't get an inquiry started. But and I was surprised we were able to get the amendment up to change the motion. I was a little bit disappointed that we are not having this inquiry now. We could have had it after it was amended. If the Labor Party had supported it, we would have had an inquiry into the former Queensland Labor government. And that could have been just a little bit of fun, Madam Acting Deputy President, because we do know they're well reported. We probably don't need another inquiry, I don't think, because it's all well reported. But we could have all remembered why it's important that Queensland doesn't have a Labor government after next March. We could have all had a recollection of why it would be disastrous for the Queensland to choose a Labor government, because we could have all reflected on what actually happened in that last Queensland Labor government. We could have all remembered how they spent $1 billion trying to change the Department of Health's payroll system to nurses, a $1 billion blowout in that particular program. We could have all remembered how the Department of Health how a staffer in the Department of Health, an official in the Department of Health, took off with something like $14 million. Can't remember exactly what it was. He took off with $14 million, and he explained it. He explained it to senior officials in the Department of Health that he had all this money, not because, of course, he was a bureaucrat in the Department of Health, but because he was a Tahitian prince. He was a Tahitian prince. He was a fake prince. A bit like that Coming to America movie, Senator Scullion, except I think Eddie Murphy was actually a prince in that movie. It was the other way around. He was faking that he wasn't a prince. This particular movie, he was faking that he was a Tahitian prince. He took off with $14 million worth of Queensland taxpayers' money. Now, if we'd had this inquiry, would have gone over that. Maybe we could have even gone to Tahiti. Maybe the inquiry could have gone to Tahiti and investigated the royal family in Tahiti, just to get to the bottom to make sure he wasn't, in fact, a priest. A prince. Sorry, Madam Acting Deputy President. But look, we haven't had to do that. I think Queenslanders realise that we don't want another Labor government in Queensland after March next year. They realise the mess that the former Queensland Labor government has got Queensland in, more than $80 billion in debt at the moment. It was heading towards $100 billion before the government changed. We had a government that was rolling over the rights of farmers and landowners, particularly through native vegetation laws. They have changed for the better, and we now have a pathway back to not only a surplus but to try and get some of this debt down. Now, those are all serious issues, and there is another serious issue here, Madam Acting Deputy President. I think it is a good thing that we have rejected this inquiry, because it would have been an abuse of this chamber's power to set up an inquiry into another government. That is not what we should waste this time on. We should focus on doing what we have responsibility for best. There are other avenues for people to have inquiries into other governments at other levels of government. There is a well-established principle of comity, which means that we should not have been supporting this inquiry. But we must always remember that the Labor Party were going to support this inquiry before it failed. They were going to run roughshod over those long-standing principles, much to the disgrace, I think, of their decisions here tonight. I think some members of the Labor Party will be disappointed that they chose to try to get this inquiry up. Presumably the reason it's taken us about 2 months to actually get to this point was because there were some people in the Labor Party who were reluctant to support it. So maybe they should have won the day and it shouldn't have come on, but it did, and we're just fortunate that it has not ended up in an abuse of power. Here we have great privileges in this chamber, to be in this chamber, and we should treat those seriously and never abuse those privileges for the sake of witch hunt type inquiries into another state, another government, another state. Thank you, Madam Deputy President.